Welcome back to the vault, where the most precious and powerful stories are kept safe for the future of our shared humanity. We unlock the secrets of the heart and the mind through stunning visuals and moving narratives. Click subscribe now and gain access to the soul.
The voice said my name, before I even had my phone unlocked. That's the part I keep coming back to, even now. Not the mudslide, not the 40-foot section of highway that dropped into the canyon, not the two cars they found at the bottom the following morning. It's that she said my name. Just once, at first. Shelley. Clear and calm and impossibly close, like someone sitting in the passenger seat. My phone was face down in the cup holder, charging. The screen hadn't lit up. I hadn't touched the radio dial. The car speakers had been quiet for the last 15 minutes, ever since I'd finished talking to my sisters, and the call dropped somewhere in the dead zone, past milepost 31. I was on Highway 36 heading west out of Cottage Grove, Oregon. It was the Friday before Thanksgiving, 10:43 at night. I've been a social worker for almost 12 years. I've driven these rural roads in all kinds of weather, all kinds of dark. The stretch of 36 that cuts through the Coast Range is the kind of road that doesn't apologize for itself. 2 lanes, no shoulder worth mentioning. Dense Douglas firs pressing in on both sides, so the headlights barely reach ahead of you. On a clear night it's beautiful. On a wet November night, with fog sliding down off the hills, and the road slick with something between rain and mist, it demands your full attention. I knew every mile of it. I'd driven it twice a week for 3 years, visiting clients in the small communities tucked between the mountains and the valley. My last appointment that day had been in the morning, but I'd gotten a call at 6 p.m. from the care facility in Crow. About 20 miles east, one of my long-term clients had taken a fall. I turned the car around and gone back out. By the time everything was sorted and documented, it was past 10:30. I remember thinking about Thanksgiving. My sister Corinne was flying in from Phoenix on Wednesday, and we were supposed to make my grandmother's sweet potato casserole. I was running the recipe in my head, the one with the brown sugar and the pecans, when the car radio cut off. Not like it faded, not like the station drifted, it just stopped. 1 second a low country song, then silence. I glanced at the dashboard. Everything looked normal. I reached over and tapped the radio button. Nothing happened. Then the speakers crackled, and a woman's voice came through. Shelley, take the mill road at the fort. I pressed my foot on the brake before I even realized I'd done it. The car slowed on the wet asphalt. I looked at my phone. The screen was completely dark. I hadn't opened any navigation app. I'd never even set up the voice assistant in this car. I'd bought it used 2 summers ago, and always meant to configure it, and never did. Hello, I said, and my voice came out smaller than I intended. Nothing. Just the sound of rain on the windshield, and my wipers sweeping back and forth. I drove for another minute, hands tight on the wheel. My mind was already running through the logical explanations. Bluetooth glitch. Some cross signal from another car on the road. Exhaustion. It was late. I'd been on my feet since 7 a.m., and I'd had maybe 4 hours of sleep the night before. The human brain does strange things when it's tired. I know that. I've sat with people who've experienced things they couldn't explain, and I've learned to hold those accounts gently, to neither dismiss them nor lean too hard on them. My phone lit up on its own. The screen glowed in the cup holder, but no calls, no texts, just the screen on for no reason, staying bright for a few seconds, then going dark again. I called my sister. You okay? Corinne picked up on the second ring. I could hear her television in the background. Yeah, I'm fine. Weird thing just happened. My radio cut out and then something came through the speakers. Sounded like a voice. What did it say? It said to take the mill road at the fork. She was quiet for a second. What fork? And what does that even mean? There's a split about 2 miles ahead. The old Nody Mill logging road branches off to the right. It's not really a road anyone uses anymore. Unpaved, bumpy, goes through about 3 miles of nothing before it connects back to the main highway. And your car just told you to take it. My car didn't tell me anything. I don't have GPS set up. I don't use the voice assistant. Corinne made the kind of sound that meant she was thinking, but didn't quite believe me. Shelley? You've been driving 2 hours in the rain after a 12-hour day. You probably heard something on the radio, and your tired brain filled it in. It said, my name. A longer pause. Okay, that's a little weird. Yeah. Maybe pull over for a few minutes? Rest stop? There's nothing out here. I'm fine. I'll call you when I get to Veneta. I hung up and turned the radio back on. It came to life without any trouble. The same country station mid-song. I exhaled slowly and kept driving. The rain picked up. The fog had thickened enough that the tree line on both sides was just a suggestion. Dark shapes, bleeding into darker sky. My headlights swept the wet pavement ahead. I cracked the window an inch and let the cold air hit my face to sharpen my attention. I told myself it was nothing. I believed that for about 4 minutes. Then the radio cut off again, same as before. No fade, just gone. The voice came back, softer this time but more urgent. Please, not the main road, not tonight. I gripped the wheel hard enough that my knuckles ached. This was different from the first time. Because the first time I'd talked myself into a rational explanation. This time the voice sounded like someone who was afraid. Not for herself. For me. Who are you? I said out loud. My voice echoed in the car. No answer. Just the wipers and the rain and the dark pressing in from every direction. The fork was coming up. I could see the county road sign in my headlights, green, weathered, tilted slightly from some past winter storm. To the left, Highway 36 continued west. To the right, an unmarked, unpaved branch disappeared into the trees. The old mill road. I slowed almost to a stop at the fork. On a normal night, I would have turned left without thinking. I'd done it hundreds of times. The highway was the logical choice. Paved, maintained, the direct route home. I sat there with my turn signal clicking left. And something in my chest said no. I don't know how else to describe it. Not fear exactly. More like the particular feeling I get sometimes in my work. When I'm sitting in someone's living room, and my brain quietly registers a dozen small things that don't add up. The bruise, that isn't quite the right shape. The way someone flinches before they realize they're flinching. Social workers talk about intuition, but really it's just years of paying close attention. And in that moment, sitting at the fork in the rain, something in me was paying attention. I turned right. The logging road was rough immediately. Gravel and ruts and shallow puddles that splashed mud up along the sides of the car. I had to drop to 15 miles an hour to keep from bottoming out. The trees crowded so close that branches scraped the mirrors. My headlights lit maybe 30 feet ahead. And then the road curved and I couldn't see past the curve. A branch scraped across the roof, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. I almost turned around. Twice I found spots wide enough to reverse, and both times I sat there with the car in reverse and then didn't. Something kept me moving forward. About a mile in, the road climbed to a ridge and for a moment I could see the main highway below through a gap in the trees. Highway 36, maybe 200 feet down the hillside. I saw headlights, a car stopped, then another behind it, then more, blue and red flashing lights appearing from the west. Emergency vehicles. I couldn't make out what had happened. The angle was wrong and the fog was too thick. But there were several vehicles stopped on that stretch of road, and none of them were moving. I kept going. The mill road was every bit as difficult as I'd expected. There was a section where a small creek had washed across it, and I had to ease through 4 inches of moving water and pray my engine didn't stall. My phone had no signal at all. I was completely alone in 3 miles of logging road in a November downpour, with nothing around me but old-growth trees and dark. And then, the car speakers crackled again. Almost there, you're almost there. I exhaled. Okay, I said to whoever or whatever was with me in that car. Okay. The road curved, descended, and then I was back on pavement. The mill road dropped me onto Highway 36 about 3 miles west of the fork. I stopped the car, hands trembling slightly, and looked both ways. The highway here was clear and quiet. I turned west and headed home. I drove a 1/4 mile before I came around a bend and saw the emergency lights. A county sheriff's cruiser was parked sideways across the road, blocking the eastbound lane. An Oregon State Police truck sat on the shoulder. 2 other vehicles were pulled over on the gravel. An officer in a rain jacket walked toward my car as I slowed. I rolled down my window. "Ma'am, you'll need to turn around. The highway east is closed. What happened? He shone his flashlight briefly across my face, and then passed me into the back seat, checking the car. Slope failure. Section of highway went down about 45 minutes ago, east side of milepost 28. We have vehicles in the ravine. He said it with the particular flatness of someone delivering terrible news who has to keep delivering it. Are you coming from the east? I came off the mill road, I said. The logging branch. I got turned around earlier. The partial truth came out before I decided how to explain myself. I don't know why. Maybe because the full truth wasn't something I could explain standing in the rain. In this weather? He looked at me like I'd said something mildly irrational. I know. Can you tell me, when did the slide happen? Sometime around 10:47, best we can tell so far. He pulled a notepad from inside his jacket. I need your name and a contact number in case we need to follow up. His name tag read Deputy Whitaker. He was methodical and calm, and I gave him my name and number and watched him write it down. He told me to take the Crow Road bypass to get back to the valley. As I pulled away, I stopped and sat with the engine idling. The slope failure had happened at 10:47 p.m. The voice had first spoken to me at 10:43. My hands were steadier than they had any right to be. It was like my body hadn't yet understood what had just happened. 4 minutes. 4 minutes had been the difference between that road and this one. Between me being home in time to call Corrine back and me being in a ravine in the dark. I got home just before midnight. I didn't sleep much. The next morning I called my supervisor Marcy and asked if she'd heard anything about the accident on 36. She had. It was already on the local news. 2 vehicles had gone into the ravine. One driver had died on impact. The other was in critical condition at Sacred Heart in Eugene. I sat with my coffee going cold and thought about the voice, and the name it had known, and the particular way it had asked. Not a command. A request. Please. Like someone who understood that they couldn't make me do anything, who was hoping I would just listen. I kept working through it for days. The voice had sounded like a woman. Not young, not old. There was a specific quality to it. Careful, like someone choosing their words because words took effort. I had heard a voice like that before. I couldn't place it, and the not placing it was the thing that kept waking me up at 3 a.m. The following Monday I had 6 home visits, scheduled. The 4th was one I'd been dreading all week. I needed to meet with the county estate administrator about a client who had passed away, Dorothy Caldwell, 81 years old, who had lived alone on 11 acres. Off Territorial Road outside of Nodi, the same stretch of country I'd been driving through the night of the slide. Dorothy had been my client for nearly 3 years. She had a big front porch and 3 chickens she called by name, and a stubbornness about her that I'd come to genuinely respect. She'd had a mild stroke 14 months before she died, and after that, speech came harder. Words arrived slower, sometimes in the wrong order. She communicated around it with patience and gesture, and the occasional written note. She was sharp. She just had to work harder to show it than she used to. Her neighbor had found her on Saturday morning. She'd passed away on Friday, sometime in the early hours. The county medical examiner estimated between 3 and 7 a.m. Friday. I pulled into the rest area off Territorial Road and sat there with the engine running for a long time. Dorothy Caldwell had known Highway 36 the way most people know their own street. She'd grown up in the valley. She'd driven that road since she was a teenager. She used to talk about it during our sessions, back when talking was easier, pointing out landmarks she remembered, places that had changed, places that hadn't changed enough. And she'd talked more than once about the embankment near milepost 28. She'd told me she could see it from the ridge road. On clear days, the way the soil slumped toward the highway. She'd called the county transportation department about it. She'd written a letter. She'd asked neighbors to call too. Nothing had happened. No one had listened. Dorothy, who in the last year of her life had to carefully ration every word, because each one cost her something, had spent years trying to warn people that a section of road was going to fail. I pressed my palms flat against the steering wheel and just breathed. The voice in my car had been careful, patient. It had told me exactly what I needed and nothing more. It had said, please, It had sounded like someone who knew that words were precious, and who used them accordingly. I'm a person who believes in documentation, in evidence, in rational explanations and repeatable outcomes. I've sat across from people who've told me things they couldn't account for, and I've learned to hold those things gently, without dismissing them, and without building too much on top of them. I don't have an explanation for what happened on Highway 36 that November night. I can't write one in a case file. I can't put it in a report. I know what time I heard the voice. I know what time the slope gave way. I know those two things are separated by 4 minutes. And I know the voice sounded like a woman who had spent over a year learning to say the most important things with the fewest words possible. That's all I know. That's everything I know. I visited Dorothy's property about a week later to document a few details for the estate file. The house was quiet in the way that houses get. When the person who held them together is gone. Her 3 chickens were still in the yard, being looked after by her neighbor until homes could be found for them. The big front porch was empty. I sat on the porch steps for a while. I didn't try to make sense of anything. I just sat there in the November cold with the bare branches overhead and let myself feel the particular grief of losing someone you showed up for, week after week, until one week there was nothing left to show up for. When I walked back to my car, I turned the radio on out of habit. Then the station changed. I hadn't touched anything. The dial moved on its own, from the afternoon talk program I'd been half listening to, across a wash of static, and then underneath the static, something. A sound I hadn't heard in over a year. Not since before Dorothy's stroke had made everything so much harder. A woman's voice, low and unhurried, humming. Just a few bars of something old. Something that sounded like a hymn. The kind of tune that doesn't have a name you'd know but that you recognize anyway. Somewhere under the breastbone. Then the static came back, and then the talk program resumed mid-sentence, as if nothing had interrupted it. I sat in Dorothy's driveway for a long time. She used to hum during our visits. A quiet, half-conscious sound she made when she was looking out the window or working on one of her puzzles. I'd never asked her what the song was. I'd always meant to, and I never did, and now I never would. I still don't know what it was, but I know the sound of it. The County Transportation Department launched an investigation into the embankment stability after the slide. In December they closed that section of Highway 36 for 6 weeks to do emergency stabilization work. I read about it in the local paper. And thought about Dorothy's letter, sitting somewhere in a county filing cabinet. I thought about all the phone calls she'd made. All the times she'd tried to tell someone. Nobody had listened, until somehow, she found a way to make sure at least one person did. I drive Highway 36 differently now. I don't drive it half thinking about recipes or grocery lists or what's waiting at home. I notice it. The way the trees press close. The places where the hillside looks uncertain. The sections of guardrail that have been patched so many times, the different shades of paint layer over each other. I drive it like someone took the trouble to teach me to pay attention. Most nights it's just a road. But sometimes, not often, maybe 5 or 6 times in the month since that November, the radio flickers for just a second. A brief interruption between songs. A quiet crackle of static that doesn't sound quite like static. And in that crackle, on the quietest nights, if I'm paying close enough attention, I think I can hear the very beginning of a hum. Just a few notes. Then, it's gone. I don't pull over when it happens. I don't get scared. I just put both hands on the wheel, keep my eyes on the road ahead, and drive. Because someone worked very hard to make sure I still could.